Hello, everyone, and welcome to the sixth episode of Don't Forget the Popcorn. Today, we will be discussing the greatest actors of all time. These are not who my favorites are, but the guys who have delivered performances that have elevated the films they are in, inspired others, and stood the test of time over the years. Just like with the directors, I will be breaking this video into two: 10 actors, 10 through 6, in video 1, 5 through 1, and video 2. This video will be males only. I felt it wasn't fair to do a list with them combined because most major award publications separate them. So I will follow that same model. I will do the same for the ladies in a future series, and that's a promise. This is part 2 of the series, so if you haven't seen part 1, stop this video and click on part 1 in the link below. So let's get into the content. These are the greatest actors of all time. Part 2. Number 5. Tom Hanks. Tom was born July 1956 in California. This is an actor who needs very little introduction. Hanks started acting in high school and studied theater in college. He attended lots of plays alone, eventually meeting Vincent Dowling, who headed a theater in Cleveland, Ohio. He became an intern at the theater and dropped out of college. In 1979, he moved to New York City and started his career in the low-budget slasher He Knows You're Alone in 1980. He starred in many major pictures in the 80s like Splash, Bachelor Party, and Big. In the 90s, he starred in A League of Their Own in 92 and won consecutive Oscars in 93 for Philadelphia and 94 for the legendary Forrest Gump. He collaborated with 5 films with Spielberg: Saving Private Ryan, Catch Me If You Can, The Terminal, Bridge of Spies, and The Post. Hanks' other films include Sleepless in Seattle, You've Got Mail, Apollo 13, The Green Mile, Castaway, The Road to Perdition, Cloud Atlas, Saving Mr. Banks, Captain Phillips, Sully, A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, News of the World, and Elvis. Tom Hanks is one of the biggest actors in Hollywood and has one of the most decorated resumes in the game. His 4-decade career is one of the most respected in Hollywood, and he is still one of the most bankable actors working. Tom has a wide range, starring in rom-coms and dramatic roles with ease. He is a true student of the game, and it shows throughout his performances. He manages to remain Tom Hanks, all while fully transforming himself into a character, always giving us that sweet Tom Hanks personality while still fully embracing the character he is portraying. The best Tom Hanks roles. Number 1, Forrest Gump. Forrest Gump, I had to put it number 1, not because it's my favorite, but because Forrest Gump is one of the most recognizable and beloved characters of all time. This character has transcended pop culture throughout the decades, one of the most quotable characters of all time. People have quoted Forrest Gump since the early 90s all the way up until now. And Forrest is one of those characters that, whether you like the movie or not, you can't help but love Forrest and root for Forrest and want the best for him. You can't help it. He's just one of those characters that you just love. He's sweet, he's honest, he's upfront about everything, and he's simple. And not simple in the head, simple in character. He doesn't want a lot, he doesn't ask for a lot. Forrest is a guy who just wants to be happy and, be with the people he cares about. And the things he does in this film are just incredible. It's incredible to see a guy who may seem like he's not all the way there do some things that most people just can't do. And this is just one of those feel good movies that when you watch it by the end, you just feel happy and good and you just want to chat about it. Number 2, Philadelphia. And Philadelphia is probably my favorite Tom Hanks role. And if you haven't seen Philadelphia, Tom Hanks plays a character who is very vital to the time period for when this film came out in. Um, this film is about AIDS, and for when it came out, it was really at the height of the AIDS epidemic. So it was a very important film for its time, and Tom's performance in this film is just heart melting. It just rips you apart. You fall in love with him, and by the end, you're just like, my lord, what a performance he gives! And him and Denzel just had such great chemistry in this film. I just felt this film was very important, and I think it's still a film that's extremely relevant to today, even though the state of what the main theme of it is about isn't as dire as it was at the time. It's still one of those important films that I think everyone should watch. Number 3, Big. And I know people are like, no Castaway, or, there's a whole bunch of Tom Hanks roles that people would have probably put at 3 instead of Big. But I picked Big because Big was the film that made me fall in love with Tom Hanks as a kid. Big came out before I was born, but when I saw Big, it's just one of those fun movies that every kid, wishes they could have at some point in their life. Every kid at some point in their life wants to be an adult. And Tom Hanks somehow makes you believe that this, what is he, 6'3", 6'3", fully grown man has the mind of like a 12 or a 13-year-old. And he plays it so fun, and he does it in a way that just feels so genuine. You almost feel like you're really watching two young kids hang out. And Tom Hanks is he's probably what, 27 or 8 in this role. He's definitely not a young man in this role, not a really young man, but you feel like that, and it's such a fun movie. It's a great family film to watch. It's funny. It's got everything you want from a classic 80s film. Number 4, Robert De Niro. Robert De Niro was born in New York City, August 1943. He studied acting at the Stella Adler Observatory and Lee Strasberg Acting Studio. His first major role came with Greeting in 1968. He gained further recognition for Bang the Drum Slowly and Mean Streets in 1973. After this, his career started to take off with The Godfather 2 in 1974, where he won his first Oscar. He played in 1976's Taxi Driver, one of the best performances of all time, and in 1978's The Deer Hunter, one of the best films of all time. Both he earned Oscar nominations for. He won a second Oscar for playing Jake LaMotta in 1980's Raging Bull, which is one of the best films of all time and one of the greatest performances of all time. He continued the 80s with The King of Comedy, one of the most underrated films of all time, Once Upon a Time in America, The Mission, and Midnight Run. In 1990, he played Jimmy Conway in the legendary Goodfellas. He directed one of the best coming-of-age stories in 1993's A Bronx Tale. His other films include Awaken, The Creepy Cape Fear, This Boy's Life, Heat, Casino, Wag the Dog, Analyze This, Meet the Parents, Silver Linings Playbook, The Irishman, and The Joker. De Niro is possibly my personal favorite actor of all time, between him and someone later on the list. His films on a personal level have brought me great joy, and his performances have been a big inspiration to me. De Niro is the kind of actor that approaches the characters he's playing very serious, even being as particular as knowing what kind of shoes the character will be wearing before he plays the role. He understands the role he is taking and just transforms into the character seemingly without effort. What is really impressive is the high level acting he's still currently putting out at his age. He is known for his troubled, mentally disturbed, and mafia characters, as well as his comedic roles. The best Robert De Niro roles. Number 1, Raging Bull. And this is probably the hardest 3 lists to make because De Niro just has so many great roles that I love. Raging Bull is one of those films that when you watch it, no matter what else is going on, you cannot keep your eyes off Robert. And also, you get a great performance from Joe Pesci in this movie. But even the great Joe Pesci can't take away from De Niro in this film. De Niro playing Jake LaMotta keeps you on the edge of your seat the entire film. You just never know what this guy is going to do. You feel like this man is a ticking time bomb, but he's so good at what he does, and he just wraps you up and makes you feel like this guy is either going to give me a giant hug and kiss me on the cheek, or he's going to punch me in the face and knock my lights out. It's one of those roles where you're scared, yet you're rooting for him, yet you're not rooting for him. You just don't even know how to handle yourself. And that's why this performance is so incredible. And not to mention the physical transformations he went through for this film, losing a bunch of weight and getting shredded to look like a beastly boxer, going through the boxing training. De Niro looked extremely natural in this film. The fight sequences look very, very smooth. The transitions are very, very nice. And later, he gains a ton of weight to play Jake later on in the film with the post-fighting career. And when you see him and what the transformation he went through, it's insane, you know. And this movie came out many years before I was born. So by the time I saw it, I'd already known who De Niro was. But when I saw it, I was just like, oh my God. Wow, Robert, you really went through this for this film. It's incredible. Number 2, Taxi Driver, which I would probably say is my favorite De Niro role. I don't know about De Niro movie, but role, yes. The reason Taxi Driver is great, Travis Bickle is one of the most mentally disturbed characters that we've ever had in cinema. He has been imitated throughout history so many times. I mean, just watch the movie The Joker. Um, Travis Bickle is one of those characters, kind of like Jake LaMotta that I was talking about previously. You have no idea what this guy is going to do at any given moment, and you are terrified. This guy is a ticking time bomb to the extreme. Travis is one of those characters that he's like that guy you know, and you kind of like him, but you also know you don't want to mess with him too much because you just don't know how crazy this dude is. That's Travis. And De Niro plays this so well. It's oh man, he just melts into this role and has you gripping the edges of your seat all the way to the end. Number 3, The Godfather 2. And guys, a lot of people would probably put this at number 1. This is one of the roles that won him an Oscar. He won an Oscar for Raging Bull as well. But Godfather 2, it helps a lot that the movie is just incredible, but what makes the movie incredible, a big part of it is Robert playing a young Vito Corleone, and it is extremely, extremely hard to follow up a performance from the great Marlon Brando. But Robert De Niro, he jumped into this role, he played a young Vito Corleone, and he did it with such grace and elegance. He learned Sicilian for this movie. He sounds like he speaks it all the time. He sounds like it's the only language he speaks. He makes you believe that he is in the old country, really doing things and building up his resume. And I don't want to give this, I'm not going to spoil anything about what he does in this film because if you haven't seen The Godfather 2, this is a movie that you absolutely must see. But when you see the transformation from young baby Vito all the way up until, you know, young grown man Vito, and then you think about what he becomes in the first Godfather, you just know that De Niro understood the assignment and what it called for, and he knew exactly what performance to give to add to this beautiful story. Number 3, Jack Nicholson. Jack Nicholson could arguably be number 1 on this list. Jack was born April 1937 in New Jersey. Jack worked at MGM Cartoon Studios in California. He declined a job as an animator to focus on an acting career. He trained to be an actor with a group called the Players Ring Theater. He made his film debut in the low-budget Crybaby Killer. Nicholson's career was going nowhere and found success as a writer and director working with Peter Fonda and Dennis Hopper and with Bob Rothson. His big on screen breakout came in 1969's Easy Rider, one of his most fun and memorable roles, where he earned an Oscar nomination. The film was a big part of American culture at the time, with its themes and relevance to the current state of the world. Jack's career really started taking off in the 70s, and he starred in Roman Polanski's Chinatown, where he was nominated for an Oscar and is considered one of the best movies ever made. In 1975, he starred in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which won the Big Five at the Oscars, getting him Best Actor. Jack's career is one of the best bodies of work in any profession. He has earned 12 Academy Award nominations, making him the most nominated actor in history. He has won three, making him one of the only actors to have done so, and has been nominated in every decade from 1960 to the 2000s. His other incredible films include The Shining, The Departed, As Good as It Gets, A Few Good Men, About Schmidt, Anger Management, Reds, Terms of Endearment, Batman, and Preezy's Honor. Jack is truly one of the best at what he does. The range this man has is only matched by a few. Jack just knows exactly what is required to make each role work. He can be funny if he needs, scary, emotional, aloof, frustrating, whatever the role requires. He has a smoothness to his voice and a charisma that only he possesses, and is just a joy to watch on screen. Jack is that guy who literally can play any role you give him. I would have no issue seeing Jack play any role you want him to. The best Jack Nicholson roles. Number one, Chinatown. Mr. Giddis. Chinatown, if you've seen Chinatown, I think you can understand where I'm going, why I say this is the best Jack Nicholson role. I think it's his best role. It's not my favorite. Um, I think Jack brings Mr. Giddis alive like almost no other actor could. Sure, there's a few others who could have probably played him, but something about Jack in here has that perfect level of intellect and wit and toughness and grittiness that blends his character up nicely and gives you a solid performance that carries this film throughout. And Jack is just one of those guys who he can turn on the charm, turn it off. He can turn on the humor, turn it off. There's a scene in this film where he tells a joke, and the joke is being told at a very, very inappropriate time, but it is so funny. And the way he delivers it just shows you the range this man has, all within this same role. If you ain't seen Chinatown, make sure you check that out. Number two, The Shining. I think it's hard to mention Jack Nicholson roles without talking about Stanley Kubrick's masterpiece of a horror film. Jack Torrance is one of the creepiest and scariest dudes of all time. And when you think about Jack Nicholson, if you cut The Shining out, you don't really think about this type of Jack Nicholson where he is just this guy going mentally unstable with each passing 10 minutes of the movie. And it's a character study where you see someone unraveling to the point where you're just afraid this guy's going to come out of your TV screen and kill you. Uh, Jack, in this performance, he carries this movie like none other. Of course, he has co-stars. Shelley Duvall is also excellent in the film, but Jack really is what makes this film special. And I think that charisma that Jack Nicholson carries really brought Jack Torrance to life, because that charisma mixed with the talent he has made Jack one of those really iconic, recognizable villains that is just hard to forget. Number three, The Departed. Now, The Departed would probably be my favorite Jack Nicholson role, because this dude is just flat out hilarious in this movie, and he is also terrifying. And not terrifying like Jack Torrance is terrifying. He's terrifying in that I don't give a fuck. I will kill you and do anything I want to you and do anything to get what I want kind of way. But he does all this with such charisma and such a personality and such charm that you just can't help but love the guy. I mean, there's so many funny little moments. The way he dresses, very eccentric, very out there. He wears, animal print ties and suits and bright colors, and he likes very, very fun-centric music, and he just has a style, and he likes hanging out with young people, and he's the man in this movie, although he's the ultimate villain. And if you haven't seen The Departed, oh, you're just doing yourself a disservice. Guys, I think it's time to get into our intermission. Before we go any further, guys, if you're enjoying what you're seeing, make sure you like and subscribe for more content. Really helps me out, and I appreciate you all for doing it. If you guys do like little clips of videos, I put a lot of them on my TikTok. Will be linked down below. Guys, I have a streaming recommendation for you. Let's keep it on topic and go with an actor that is on this list. We're going to go with Casino, 1995, directed by Martin Scorsese, starring Robert De Niro, Joe Pesci, and Sharon Stone. Casino is one of those epics that you just can't help but take your eyes off the screen while you're watching. We got Scorsese in his prime. It's a post Goodfellas movie, so it often gets compared to it, but they are different films. And do not go into Casino thinking you're going to watch another Goodfellas. They're two different movies, similar tropes and topics, but they are two different movies. Casino, you get a great, great, great performance from Robert De Niro, and he has this intellect to him, and he has this character to him where you know he's doing the right thing, but he also has this badass kind of scary thing going on with him that puts a little bit of fear over you while you're watching him. Joe Pesci is an absolute monster in this, and it's amazing. He's funny as usual, and he's scary as usual, but you get a great performance from Joey, also as usual. This is one of those movies that, if you got some time to kill, you watch. It is a little bit longer, but guys, it is absolutely worth your time if you like this genre. This is streaming on Peacock, so make sure you check out Casino if you haven't. All right, guys, let's get back into the content. Number 2, Marlon Brando. Marlon was born April 1924 in Nebraska. He had a troubled youth life with his parents and ended up in military school. After his final year in 1943, he followed his sisters to New York. He studied acting and was an avid student of Stella Adler, where they studied the Stanislavski system, which fully breaks down the internal and external aspects of a character. Marlon's talents were very evident early on, and he was known as one of the first actors to take a realistic approach to acting. Brando's rise to fame came when he starred in the film adaptation of A Streetcar Named Desire in 1951, where he earned his first Oscar nomination and is considered one of his best roles. He earned another Academy Award nomination the next year for his role in Viva Zapata. He did Julius Caesar in 1953 and The Wild One. He starred in one of his best roles in 1954's On the Waterfront, playing Terry Malloy. This film earned him an Oscar and is considered one of the best and most influential films and roles of all time. I should have been a contender. After a career slip, he came back to the top in the 70s, starring in The Godfather in 1972 as Vito Corleone. This film is often considered the greatest movie ever made, and his performance is often cited as the best performance of all time. He won an Oscar in this film, and his performance has gone on to become one of the most referenced in pop culture. Marlon Brando is often considered the best. He is credited for having helped invent method acting, a technique still used today. His acting style and approach is considered to be the standard for modern acting, and many other actors credit him as a huge inspiration. Marlon knows just how to turn a character into a human. He brings emotions out of his characters that most actors just cannot. He has such a natural approach to it, it almost feels like he's not acting at all. He would often ad-lib his lines and is known for his dramatic monologues and intense performances. Marlon is one of my personal favorite actors. Marlon was the first actor that made us look at acting as a coveted art form that transcended it to new heights. The best Marlon Brando roles. Number 1, On the Waterfront. This is also my favorite Marlon Brando role. Playing Terry Malloy, Marlon Brando. In the 50s, we had great performances before this, and we had great performances after this. This performance here kind of changed the acting game forever, I believe. I believe this was one of the first performances where someone really poured their heart into a role and you really didn't feel like you were watching a movie anymore. You felt like you were sitting right in front of someone watching them go through their life. Um, the monologue Marlon Brando gives towards the end of the film, where he's talking to his brother in the car, is one of the best monologues of all time, one of the most quoted, and easily, when you watch it, you can easily just understand why people have said this man is the best to ever do it. This film is one of those films, if you're watching it today, it's been out for quite some time. If you're watching it today and you're a younger person, this is one of those films that will probably make you appreciate older films. And a big reason for it would be Marlon Brando's performance. I'm telling you, if you haven't seen On the Waterfront, it is one that you absolutely must watch. Number two, The Godfather. Now, a lot of people would say this is Marlon's best role, and I have no problems with that. This is one of those characters he kind of invented. The voice, the movements, the look, everything. You know, the Godfather, the way he speaks to you and the way he gets his messages across. It was just mind blowing at the time. Marlon was doing something that I don't even think he realized he was changing the world forever. A big reason why this movie is not just considered one of the best films of all time, it is often considered the best film of all time. A big reason for that is Marlon's performance. Marlon embodied this. You know what? Everyone's seen The Godfather by now. When you see him fall in the garden, tell me it just doesn't freaking crack your heart in half. Just tell me it doesn't. Number three, A Streetcar Named Desire. And it was kind of hard to pick number three because I went back and forth with a few, but he can't be denied in A Streetcar Named Desire. Marlon Brando plays one of those kind of this role here is one of those roles that shows you what a lot of people today would call a toxic masculine role. Marlon is a man's man, an alpha man, very, very dominant figure in this film. And he plays that I'm tough, I'll hurt you, but I'll love you so much all the way till the end type of character, that troubled, very passionate guy that we know and love today. And we've seen tons of actors portray these types of characters. I think this was the first time this role has ever really been brought to life in a way that so many people could relate to. And if you watch this movie, any young ladies who have been in relationships with men like this, if you watch this movie, you will feel like you'll probably start having PTSD with the performance that Brando's given you. If you're a man that feels the way Marlon does and shares the same thoughts and insight on life, love, relationships, women, you will probably relate to this character very much so. Um, this is one of those characters where really don't know how to feel about the character as you're watching it, but by the end of the film, you know you watched something very special. Guys, we got to have some honorable mentions. And I picked 10. And this was first of all, picking this 10 list was extremely difficult. Picking these 10 honorable mentions was extremely difficult. Cutting certain guys in and out just felt awful. But this is who we came up with. Honorable mentions: Al Pacino, Humphrey Bogart, Paul Newman, Robin Williams, Jeff Bridges, Johnny Depp, Joaquin Phoenix, Christian Bale, Gary Oldman, and Gene Hackman. I apologize if your favorite actor or the person you think is the best was not mentioned on this list. Guys, let's get into our number one pick for the greatest actor of all time, Daniel Day-Lewis. Daniel was born in April in London. He excelled on the stage at a young age and eventually being accepted in a Bristol Old Vic Theatre School, which he attended for 3 years. In 1980s, Daniel was part of the Royal Shakespeare Company. Midway through a stage performance of Hamlet, he left the performance during the scene where the ghost of Hamlet's father appears before him. It has been his last stage performance. He appeared in Bounty in 1984 and achieved critical acclaim for his role as Stephen in My Beautiful Laundrette in 1985 and appearing in A Room with a View in 1986. He was a leading man in The Unbearable Lightness of Being in 1988, My Left Foot in 1989, which earned him his first Oscar and is one of the greatest screen performances of all time. The Last of the Mohicans in 1992, In the Name of the Father in 1993, and Age of Innocence in 1993. After the film The Boxer in 1997, he took a break from acting and made shoes until returning to work with Scorsese and DiCaprio in 2002's Gangs of New York, where he played Bill the Butcher, one of the most bone-chilling performances of all time, and earned an Oscar nomination. He then teamed up with the great Paul Thomas Anderson and made one of the greatest films of all time, There Will Be Blood, playing Daniel Plainview, which earned him his second Oscar and is considered one of the greatest characters ever invented. He played Abraham Lincoln in Spielberg's Lincoln in 2012, earning him his third Oscar. He teamed up again with PTA after a decade for 2017's Phantom Thread, where he earned another Oscar nomination, and he has since been retired from the game. Daniel Day-Lewis is easily the most natural and transcendent actor of all time. Extreme measures to achieve perfection in a role, he stays in character the entire time of production, only answering to the character names and behaving only in ways that the character would. Although his career spans over 4 decades, he has only appeared in a handful of movies as he is extremely selective and has had many breaks over his career. Having said that, he's the only male actor to have 3 wins in the Best Actor category and the third actor with 3 Academy Award wins, which is more impressive based on the limited chances he has to win. Daniel is easily one of the most talented and impressive actors to watch on screen, and if you've seen even a few of his films, you will fully understand why he is number one on this list. The best Daniel Day-Lewis roles. Number one, My Left Foot. This is my favorite Daniel Day-Lewis role, but not my favorite Daniel Day-Lewis movie. This role where he plays Christie, it's one of those heartwarming roles. First of all, Christie is hilarious. This movie is funny. It is not a sad, depressing movie as it may seem once you know what it's about. This is one of those films that actually makes you feel good. It's a happy film. Do not get me wrong, it has its emotional moments. I did shed a tear when I first saw this film, but I laughed so much. But the thing that makes this movie great is the great Daniel Day-Lewis playing a character who has cerebral palsy. This man only worked and did things in a wheelchair for the entire time he was playing this character. And it shows in the film. He even went to the lengths of breaking some ribs to get this character right. Using only his left foot to do everything. Daniel felt real. I felt like I was watching someone who really had this disability. If you didn't know this was an actor and you didn't know his name, you would think they found a real person with cerebral palsy to play this role. This is by far, easily, one of the top 3 on-screen performances of all time. You can argue with me if you want. Number 2, There Will Be Blood. Now, this is one of my favorite Daniel Day-Lewis movies. Yeah, I'll go ahead and say it's my favorite Daniel Day-Lewis movie. Oh, the great PTA and Daniel Day came up with one of the most brilliant characters that we've ever seen on screen. The reason that Daniel is so great in this role is because you just cannot take your eyes off of him. The way he moves, the way he speaks, the way he carries himself, it's just all so purposefully done. Everything is done with intent. Nothing in this role is done on accident. Daniel brought this to life. He made this character, okay? Even though this film is based on a book, I believe it's pretty loosely based. Daniel brought Daniel to life. Daniel invented Daniel, and no one else could have done what Daniel did for this film. Well-deserved Oscar win, and this film is just, it's bone-chilling. Number 3, Gangs of New York. And I kind of went back and forth between Lincoln and between Phantom Thread because I believe all of those roles are absolutely incredible as well, but I ultimately landed on Bill the Butcher for Gangs of New York because Bill the Butcher is one of the scariest dudes you have ever seen. Oh, if you guys have seen the film a couple times and you know some of the lines, I don't want to give any scenes away because the movie is older, but there are still some people who haven't seen it. Just watch it. There's a scene with him and Leo DiCaprio, and he says a line in it, and it just always sticks in my head. Um, Bill the Butcher went through a crazy transformation to play this role. I think Daniel Day-Lewis didn't shower for like a month or 6 weeks or something like that while they were filming it. That grease on his hair that you see sticking down his head, yeah, that's real. That wasn't done on purpose. That's actually from him not showering. Um, he dressed like Daniel or like Bill the entire time, even when he was out in public. People were terrified of him. He was scary as self in the movie. He actually put the glass on his eye. He actually put a piece of glass on his eye and actually tapped it with a knife like you see him do in the movie. Bill in this film is one of those characters that you love to hate. Although he's a total asshole and you can't agree with anything he says or does, you cannot help but love this dude. He is a badass and something about him is just extremely likable. And it's you feel like you're watching a very interesting father-son dynamic here with these two characters. Daniel Day-Lewis, There Will Be Blood, My Left Foot, and Gangs of New York. If you haven't seen any of his movies, watch one of them 3 and you will understand why he is the best actor of all time. Guys, thank you very much for tuning in to the final installment of the best actors of all time. I really hope you enjoyed. Make sure you like and subscribe if you enjoyed the content. Guys, I will be back next week. And don't forget the popcorn.